I choose a favorite pipe, and then I pack it with a codger blend. And when I've tamped it down just right, I strike my Zippo for a light. Then settle back upon my deck, I draw and puff and recollect the countless blessings of my life, but most of all, my children, wife, and think of how the richest type looks poor beside me with my pipe. Hello there, YTPC. Welcome back to Perkins Pipes. A little bit different way to start one of these episodes. Going to talk about poetry today. It seemed totally appropriate to have the Peterson Professor from the Sherlock Holmes line. I've mentioned before that I just love words. I mean, I'm a Latin teacher, I'm a writer, speaker, and I love words. I love everything about the production of words. I love, as we've seen before, fountain pens. We've talked about fountain pens numerous times on the channel. I love fonts. I love typewriters. I love calligraphy. Love it all. And I agree with the title of this book by Timothy Steele, who at the time was a professor of English at Cal State in Los Angeles. And let's see, this came out in '99. Steele was a professor of English and a poet. And his book is called All the Fun's in How You Say a Thing. And I absolutely agree with that. The fun is in how you say things with words. And I wanted to share with you some poetry of mine. Hey, if Malcolm Guite can do it, right, so can I. One of my books, and this is a very battered copy, is Achilles in Rome, the Latin Iliad of Bibius Italicus. And you've heard me speak about the Iliad before. Of course, the great epic poem by Homer, written in Greek. It was 24 books of poetry, thousands of lines of poetry. And in the 1st century AD, a Roman poet named Bibius Italicus condensed the whole thing into a mere 1,060 lines, and really be half the size of this book, because this book is bilingual. It's both English and Latin. So really half the size of this little book. And for the longest time in the Middle Ages, that was the only form of the Iliad that was known. In fact, people actually thought this was Homer. Before the Homeric manuscripts were discovered. So, just to give you a little taste of this, I translated this, golly, I don't know when, 2006. So coming up on 20 years. And there really, at the time, was only one English translation of this Latin translation, and it wasn't really very accessible. So I did it, and we'll give you a little bit of the opening here. Starts off in the Latin. Iram pande mihi peledae diva superbi tristia quae miseris injecit funera graiis, ad quanimas fortes eroam tradet et orco, latrantumque dedit rostris volucumque trahendos illorum exsangues inumatis ossibus artus. Confiebat enim sumi sententia regis undet pertulerant discordia pectora pugnas, sceptriger atrides et bello clarus Achilles. The opening lines are fairly, reasonably accurate of a Latin translation to the Greek. What's funny is that the guy who did this Bibius Italicus guy, he made the first line of each, the first word of each line begin with a letter of his name. So the first few lines there spell out Italicus. It's kind of like Bo Diddley putting his name into some of his songs. And so my translation runs like this. And so I try to keep that acrostic. So the first line, or the first word of each of my opening lines begins with I-T-A-L-I-C-U-S, spelling out Italicus, just as he did it. Ire of the arrogant son of Peleus, O goddess, reveal to me, which flung grim death upon the woeful Greeks, and surrendered the brave souls of warriors to Orcus, leaving their bloodless limbs to the snouts of snarling dogs, the beaks of birds, instead of burying their bones. For the will was coming to pass of the highest king, until two hearts bitterly opposed had brought forth battles, scepter-wielding son of Atreus and Achilles, famous in war. As a fan of the Iliad and a fan of poetry, that was just a personal project. I just wanted to do that. I had a lot of fun with it. But what I really want to introduce you to are 3 volumes of poetry called the Panther Poetasters. The Panther Poetasters. And I'll give you the background on this. I put it at the beginning. In the fall of 2006, Paul Brown, who was a teacher that I was teaching with at the time, and I enjoyed a fun poetic email exchange, and it just so happened that this took place about the time my advanced Latin students were reading Catullus' poem 50. In this poem, the Roman poet Catullus reflects on a day in which he and his friend Licinius had experimented with different poetic forms. As Catullus puts it, each one of us writing little verses, played now with this meter and now with that. And so my friend and I were having this conversation. He was a math teacher, and he was a math teacher with a poetic soul. As we got to talking about that, how these ancient poets, as Catullus and a friend of his, had played around one day with poetry. They just kind of got out their wax tablets, started writing poetry. Hey, why don't we try this? Ooh, what if we tried that? And in many ways, it was really a lot like jazz. If you think about jazz, excuse me, jazz is very improvisational, right? It's on the spur of the moment, and you're playing with forms. And so it's really very jazz-like. And so we got talking about that. And so I decided to start an email poetry challenge for several faculty members that I knew had literary souls. And so I sent this email out. I said, I humbly offer for your consideration the Panther Poetasters. So a poetaster is someone who's really not very good at poetry. And the panther was the mascot of the school where we all taught at that time. I said, each Monday during period 3, I will send to all who are interested the guidelines for that week's poetry challenge. Each challenge will include a specific style to be used that week, complete with explanation for those who may have forgotten the exact pattern of, say, trochaic trimeter. It'll also include the topic to be used in the poems. And so basically we set ourselves a poetic challenge, just like those ancient poets had done. Each week. And we then email each other our poems, enjoy reading them, and then we ended up publishing them privately, the collection at the end of the year. And we did such things as, oh my goodness, just looking down through the table of contents here. 1 week we played with limerick, 1 week heroic couplets, 1 week haiku, ballad stanza, rap, the sonnet form, sestina, terzerima, parody. We did it again the next year, volume 2. And what did we play with that year? We the roundel, the cinquain, the ode. Some of it was based on more of the topic. Inspiration via Willie Nelson was 1 week. Ghostly inspiration. 14ers. And then we did it one more year. We did a total of 3 years. And in volume 3, we explored, let's see here, mock epic, translation, magic dactyls, the renga, anapests, and just all kinds of topics and forms of poetry. And it was so much fun. And I want to share with you just a few of mine. If you like this kind of thing, you enjoy poetry, literature, the finer things of life, pipes, of course, we certainly invite you to click subscribe. And if you'd ever want to sit down with me and chat via Zoom and a pipe, please see the link in my YouTube profile. You can email me and be a guest on an upcoming episode of Brierside Chat. So in this volume, I've flagged one. This is fun. So this particular week, the challenge was to create a mock epic story in traditional ballad stanzas. And so this one was mine. One Tuesday morn, the dawning sky turned black as the roiling deep. A deluge burst and commuters fought their cars on the road to keep. Oh, many were late to school that day. To school so many were late. The tensions flared in the copy room, midst teachers forced to wait. My class is starting, let me run, just 30 copies, please, cried one poor soul whose colleagues snarled, when I have finished these. But you've a stack of 50 sheets to staple double-side, where I have but a single page, a quiz, my God, she cried. Then one new teacher raised his hand amidst the angry mob, now crowding round the large machine with many a copy job. Sven Otterschnink then uttered words that silenced all the rage. I'll make your copies all by hand, mere seconds for each page. My great-granduncle was a monk who copied text with care, and I have taken on his gifts his speedy scribal air. The others scoffed, it can't be done. Your ways are out of date. Besides, the first bell has just rung, and we cannot be late. Undaunted Sven set ink and quill upon the workroom table, and with a smile asked, who'll be first? I'll show you that I'm able. The teacher with the quiz stepped up. Here, copy mine, said she. Sven's quill blazed words so fast his hand no mortal eye could see. When Sven cried, next, a line soon formed, their copy needs to press into his hands, man or machine, the faster who would guess. The large machine, but halfway through its stapled double side, ran out of toner, paper jammed, with error lights, and died. The other teachers raced to class, fresh copies they clutched tight, and shouted thanks to Sven, who slumped, exhausted, out of sight. His quilling work had left him spent, and parched for something wet. Unthinking, he reached for his well, and downed the liquid jet. With bulging eyes and gasping breath, he saw he'd drunk the ink, whose poison proved untimely death for scribe Sven Otterschnink. So that was a fun one. I've always enjoyed that, and I've sometimes even shared that one with some of my students there. Just a fun little ballad stanza-based poem. Then in the second volume, I wanted to share with you, let's see here. Well, this was, we were doing a roundel. A roundel is a 3-stanza poem of 11 lines. The stanzas have 4, 3, and 4 lines in them, and a rhyme scheme of A-B-A-B, B-A-B, A-B-A-B. Line 4 is repeated as line 11. And I started it off, it starts off making allusions to like the Iliad, the Aeneid, classic war epics, and then moves to something more modern, and we think about more terrorist wars of the modern age. Heroes exchange blows in the war, reeling, careening, and action poetic, hoping their fame like a star will rise in music mimetic. Do rhythm and words, stitched synthetic, carry us too far from the flinch of battles electric? The bomb in the roadside car, putting flesh, metal, stone, eclectic, for sale in the martial bazaar, will rise in music mimetic. much more serious poem there. And what was enjoyable for me, and I think for all of us, was playing with the different forms. And I don't think I'd ever tried that particular form, the roundel, before. So again, that was quite fun to experiment and play around and see what we could do. And then I've got two that I want to share with you here. Let's see here. This one, our challenge was to compose something entirely in anapests. And as I wrote, simply because I think the word anapest is fun and wanted to use it in a challenge. And an anapest, the anapistic foot is bum, 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 bum. So unstressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, unstressed, stressed, bum, 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 bum. And what I chose to do was based on, we'll bring up a copy of it here, this 1899 painting, the Surrender of Vercingetorix. Vercingetorix was the great Gallic leader who unified the tribes of Gaul and fought one last pitched battle against Julius Caesar. When Julius Caesar was leading his Roman troops on the wars of conquest in the decade of the 50s BC. And you really could see the proud stature of Vercingetorix as he's riding up to surrender to Caesar. With the break of the dawn, he climbed down to his horse and he galloped along on his self-fated course. A mighty wind blew his, a light wind blew, can't say it. A light wind blew his hair and his mighty mustache as he called back the dreams that had now turned to ash. For he once had united the tribes of his race when the youth of rebellion had shone on his face. But the battles and sieges had taken their toll, and though riding with vigor, he now felt quite old. With his army thus shattered, his people enslaved, he had offered himself in an effort to save from extinction the few who survived in one day would rise up and make conquerors learn how to pay. Thus emboldened with visions of glorious Gaul, he spurred onward his charger preparing to fall, not at Caesar's proud feet, but with confident pride, to the face of his rival with head high to ride. Though defeated at last, he'd victorious stand and give hope to his people from his dying hand. And the anapest, that ba-ba-bum, 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 ba-ba-bum sort of rhythm seemed appropriate for a man riding a horse in really a bit of rebellion still, even as he was going to surrender. And finally, I wanted to share with you this one. It was called Magic Dactyls. This week, the challenge was inspired by the title of the movie Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium, which is a wonderful movie with Dustin Hoffman. The title is in dactylic tetrameter. Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium. Okay, so that's it's a dactylic structure and it's doubled. The task was to compose a poem that strongly featured this rhythm. The topic was the magical and enchanted time of childhood. And I like this one probably the best of all that I did those years. This is one based on my own children and my observation of their rooms after I'd put them to bed. Legos and Lincoln logs, race cars and knights at arms, rest where last played on the floor of your room. Crayons and storybooks, favorite stuffed animals, scattered yet hoping that you'll wake up soon. Next door, a similar slumber time scene appears. Dishes and dollies and cardboard books lie near the glass slippers and long princess dresses that help you to proudly proclaim, "Thus am I." Brother and sister, each snuggled and sleeping now. Round them are spread all the spoils of the day, calling me back to a time of pure innocence, back to a world where I wish I could stay. So here's a question for you to round out this episode. Have you ever written poetry? Have you ever considered writing poetry with other people? Just having fun with it. You don't have to be a professional poet. We enjoy poetry. We enjoy the creation. Heck, we enjoy creating things. You know, like the other day, we did a video, created this tamper. This is just for me, and having fun with it. So have you ever written poetry? Maybe even just for the fun of it. Share your thoughts with us. We'd love to hear them. As Malcolm Guite likes to say, I do these little things in order at last to do nothing. Or as I like to say in Latin, Parva ago ut tandem, nihil agam. Have a wonderful day.